everyone, I'm here to talk a little bit about the details in crop pollination. Is it enough to look at the bigger picture? Historically, crop pollination studies have focused on plant mating systems, the dependence on animals for successful pollination, and also on the management of bees for pollinating crops. However, more or less 2 decades ago, we have the creation of the pollinator initiatives, mainly due to the Convention on Biological Diversity. And we also had the colon collapse disorder. These 2 events, they brought attention to the stressors on pollinators, populations, and pollination, and also brought awareness of the importance of bees to crop pollination. We can see here in Brazil, for example, that from 2009 to 2018, we had a boost on the publication of studies related to pollination. So pollination has become one of the most studied ecosystem surveys. We can see here in this graph from the paper from Noriega that shows that most studies are on pollination, and that pollinators are one of the most studied groups involved in ecosystem services. So bees, from being the enemy, they became the saviors. So now if we look at a research on Google with some keywords like bee missing, healthy pollinators, save the bees, we have billions of results, and we have even GIFs saying clean the seas, plant more trees, save the bees, plant more flowers. So we had an increased awareness of the importance of bees and pollinators to our food. And in science, we had important advances on understanding the effects of landscape and pollinator diversity on crop pollination. So here are just some of examples of it. So we had showed some patterns on crop pollination. And from these patterns, we had also many recommendations on how to manage the landscape and pollinator to increase landscape heterogeneity and pollinator diversity, and with the aim of increased yield. In Brazil, 66% of the crops that we use for food have some aspect of the pollination studied. 75% of them, they have a list of flora visitors, not pollinators, flora visitors. And only 48% of them, we can infer the dependence on animal pollination. And some we can only infer, we don't know for sure. And furthermore, the studies on crop pollination are concentrated here in the southwest of Brazil. You see that there is many places that we know nothing about crop pollination. So we had now many answers from meta-analysis and looking at this big picture based on studies on some areas, which is good, it's an advance, but do we know enough about the details of the pollination of crops to ensure that pollinator management is successful? Because we have some patterns, but for some places like Brazil that I showed these reports, we don't know which are the pollinators and also where they are. And furthermore, do we know enough about the pollination mechanisms and the effectiveness of different bee species? Besides that, bee community or pollinator community varies, especially in a place big like Brazil. Also, the different varieties, cultivars of the crop plants, they may have slightly different pollination requirements, and it also varies with the regional climates. So the details in pollination are, especially for crop, they are the animal pollination dependence. That is very important to know, so we can answer if we need to manage pollinators or not for that crop plant, and the mechanisms, because not all flowers are pollinated in the same way, and as I said, not all varieties, cultivars are pollinated in the same way. Their morphology may be different. Also, the resources that they offer to bees, for example, and pollinator behavior is a key factor in successful pollination. So, for example, honeybees that are the most used crop pollinator, they are not effective for every plant species. Although not everybody, but many people think that we can use honeybees and everything is solved. All the problems are solved. So I will bring you only one example, that's from apple. So apples, they have this flower that is not a difficult flower to reach the nectaries and the resources. So the nectaries are in the base of the anthers. And here on the top, we have the stigmas and the anthers. So if an insect wants nectar, they can come from the top or from the base, from the side, I'm sorry, and they can reach easily. And when they want pollen, they can also reach easily here. However, they will be pollinators if they work on the top. When they come from the side, they won't touch the reproductive organs. So, and we have some other complications. So the apple trees, they are self-incompatible, and depending on the cultivar, they are even incompatible with the same cultivar. So for example, if we have a Fuji tree, we need a Gala tree to pollinate it. Of course, there are some varieties that are all self-compatible, but most of them have this issue. Most of the cultivars have this issue. So bees, they pollinate only when they collect pollen or nectar from the top, as I was mentioning, and also bees pollinate when they visit trees from different cultivars. because then they are doing cross-pollination. And the apple cultivars, they can vary in flower structure. So when the stamens are very close together, the bees cannot reach the nectaries from the side. They have to go from the top. So this cultivar, they induce the bees to have the proper behavior, let's say like this. Whenever when the stamens are more open, the bees tends to go from the side and rob the nectars. And also, we have honeybee strains that like to collect pollen more than others. So they collect more pollen, and then they are better pollinators, or more effective pollinators, or efficient pollinators. So what we can do is to make a management to increase the probability of bees of collecting pollen. So, for example, we can do a sequential introduction of honeybee colonies and doubling their density to increase cross-pollination. And also, if we manage honeybees and bumblebees, or here in Brazil, we have a study that manage honeybees and stingless bee. We can increase the cross-pollination and the yield. But why? Because bees, when they are more, there are other species, they tend to move more, because when they are there collecting, very relaxed, another species come and they don't like it, so they fly to another flower. It increases the chances of cross-pollination. So that's why diversity matters in crop pollination as well. And here in south of Brazil, we did a survey on the visitors of apple flowers, and we found all of these bee species. Some of them, like honeybees, Plebeia remota, Plebeia sequita, Dragonisca fibris, these last three, they are stingless bees, so they can be managed in orchards to increase pollination. However, we still don't know if they are effective pollination. We know that they are visitors. So that's why I'm saying that, asking if we know enough about the details in pollination to ensure an efficient crop pollination. And we have some carpenter bees that we don't have exactly like hives that we can manage, but we could put trap nest and do landscape a better landscape to bring them to the orchards. So I would like to highlight that the management of the bees for crop pollination also depends on the availability of breeding techniques. So we don't know, for example, yet how to breed in large-scale stingless bees. We have had some advances in that, but it's still not enough for crop pollination. And we had to study things like diseases, pests, genetics, because the management of bees for crop pollination also have consequences for bee populations, both managed and wild. We have to remember what we are doing to bees. So in the case of honeybees and bumblebees, the management for crop pollination and the breeding for crop pollination have brought several consequences for them and for wild populations. So thank you. I hope I brought more questions than answers so we can pursue and keep doing science. And you can reach me at one of these social media. Thanks.